and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. Probably the first news I'm going to get into has to deal with this drought in California that we're seeing water levels dropped. And I was thinking, and I started just, going to start page and searching different keywords. And, there's been a lot of things going on that I've noticed that could contribute to a lot of this. From what I've been seeing, there's a lot of man-made reservoirs that don't get as much water runoff. And when I'm talking about that, artificial flows from other dams that they would use for irrigation. So, when I see that and they talk about the drought and the irrigation, and I was looking, and it kept going back to more articles and more articles about, this little fish that need to be saved. And that's kind of where I started realizing, a lot of what California has, we forget that, a lot of California was more deserty in Southern California. The woods were more dense in Northern California. You had this different climates because California is long, but there's a lot of parts of Southern California that were artificially greened up. And you start going back farther, and you see how government has always had this hand in it. And while I was searching, a recent video popped up, and it was from Stefan Molyneux, and I watched it, and I don't like all of his views on things. But, I started looking at a lot of what he was saying and searching on it. And, a lot of what he points out about government, and never mind maybe his personal belief or views on the issue, pay attention to the government's hand in this and their motives that they were open about. usually. But in, that mischievous way. Let me play this clip and we'll get a little bit further into it.
So today, the governor of California started to impose significant restrictions on the use of water. So there's a shortage. And wherever you see a shortage, particularly one that has taken a long time to develop, well, the first thing you're going to look for is government manipulation of prices. If you keep the price artificially low, you are guaranteed to create a shortage if the good is in demand. So it's not global warming, it's not suburban sprawl, it's not space aliens stealing liquid. The West is not a heck of a lot more dry at the moment than it has been in various other times throughout its history. And of course, suburban and urban residents only use a fraction of the water consumed in the West. Yes, it's our good friend the farmer. Agriculture in the West uses over 80% of the water used in Western states. And most of that water is stored and pumped and diverted using dams, pumps, and aqueducts paid for by the U.S. taxpayer, most likely you. In the late 19th century, there's nothing more gripping than a story that begins in the late 19th century, there was a move to get the government to take over the cost of irrigation. Why? Because the government wanted people to move west for a variety of reasons. One was that there was a lot of discontent and social rebellions fermenting in the East. So they thought, hey, if we send people west, get them to be farmers, they'll take the pressure off. And they were concerned about anarchists and other malcontents causing trouble, so they sent them west. There was a plan that said if you went and farmed, or at least made improvements to a land, you could get up to 160 acres free. And the railways, of course, wanted governments to take over the cost of irrigation so that there'd be more farmers further away, which meant that there'd be more transportation requirements. Politicians and their cronies, of course, love this kind of stuff because what they do is they buy up a whole bunch of land for almost nothing because it's desert. And then they say, hey, just coincidentally around that land, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put taxpayer-funded irrigation in. Thus, the value of the land explodes and politicians and their cronies can make an absolute fortune. So as a result of a lot of political lobbying in 1902, yes, a long time ago, there was the federal government's Bureau of Reclamation. It started off fairly small. It exploded in size and power during the Great Depression, of course, when it became spend money to buy jobs. The Hoover Dam, countless smaller dams and water diversion projects and so on. It became a huge bureaucracy with an immense amount of power. And so basically through the taxpayers, hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent over the years to get water to growers and other well-connected interests. Here's an example. The Central Arizona project pumps water up 3,000 feet vertically and then moves it across 160 miles of desert from Colorado, the Colorado River, to Central Arizona. Costs a little under $5 billion. And of course, most of the cost is paid for by people who will never live in Arizona. So for more than a century, this Federal Bureau of Reclamation has built and operated dams, canals, hydroelectric plants in the 17 western states. It's the largest wholesale seller of water in the nation, second largest producer of hydroelectric power. It has 58 plants, about 250 dams, 350 reservoirs used for power, irrigation, flood control, and recreation. They spend a couple of $1 billion a year, and that's not cheap. So it's socialized, it's communized, it's governmentized, and this is, of course, where you end up with these kinds of messes. So not only did the government spend huge amounts of money, basically they had a damn everything approach, and they also extended repayment periods. So initially, you were supposed to pay back the costs of these dams and irrigation projects in 10 years. 1914, they extended it to 20 years, and 1926, they extended it to 40 years. And the Central Arizona project had an even longer repayment period. And in 1939, almost right before a war, I suppose, they increased subsidies further. They said, well, there's a 10-year grace period before you even begin to have to pay anything back. Now, of course, politicians love massive programs that require payments many, many years down the road. So they get to hand out jobs and they don't get the resistance of taxpayers because of deferred payments. The taxpayers don't see the hit right away. And if there's a 10% discount rate, what it means is that this was a 91% subsidy. It's like those ads that show up, find out where this journalist found iPads for 90% off. It's like, well, find out where farmers found water 90% off. 15% or less of project costs were typically repaid when interest costs were included. And so we're an 85 to 90% subsidy. And this is how you get the magic of rice in a desert. Now, this is just part of the cost. There is mitigation of the environmental damage done by these federal dams and irrigation systems. Salinity problems or excess salt in the water is a big problem in river systems. So you bring the irrigation water, it goes through the fields and then flows back into the rivers. But as it goes through the soil, it picks up salt and other minerals. And so the western rivers that are heavily used for irrigation sources become very saline or salty downstream. And the Colorado River is really salty by the time it gets to the Mexican border, and Mexicans complained. And so the reclamation monolith from the federal government built a very expensive desalting plant. It's called the Yuma plant. It's in Arizona at a cost of $245 million. But you see, it wasn't used ever since it was completed in 1993. So it really was $245 million completely wasted. On the other hand, it's been about $100 million over the last 2 decades just for maintenance costs on something which is not even be used. So California has the Central Valley Project. It's the largest irrigation project. It provides almost 7,000 farmers water for about 3 million acres of land. And the farmers get the water at about 10% of its market value. So when you have a 90% subsidy, what happens is people plant, they make decisions, they open up farms, they buy farmland, and you get a very unsustainable, unsupportable expansion of economic and human activity. In 2002, so this was a while back ago, the subsidy was worth about $416 million a year. And that's really quite astounding. And not only do they get subsidies in water, they get subsidies from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So about 1/3 of federal irrigation water in the CVP went to crops that received USDA subsidies, about $90 million. A year, they mostly go to cotton and rice farmers. Now, rice kind of have to have it underwater for a while. Not the best crop for a desert if you don't have the fire hose of illicit government spending. So we've got water subsidies, we've got electricity, we've got subsidies for crops, and we also have electricity subsidies. The CVP uses these massive pumps requiring huge amounts of electricity to push water through about 1,400 miles of canals, which I think is similar to farming on Mars. And as they undercharge the farmers for the costs of the electricity to the tune of about $100 million subsidy. Now, of course, like most subsidies, it's the politically connected and the big companies that do really well. The largest 10% of farms in the CVP, it's about 700 farms, get about 2/3 of the project's entire water supply. And as of 2002, so more than a decade ago, these got average subsidies of $349,000 directly. So this is, again, it's the usual corporate welfare for the rich. So one of the things that happens is that you end up very inefficiently using water when it's artificially cheap. There's an estimate that says if you increase 10% the water prices, it brings about a 6.5 reduction in irrigation water use in California. Now, of course, if you get a $50 iPad, let's say you get $550 iPads, what's your first impulse? Well, probably to make sure they're legal, but if they're legal, to resell them. So more restrictions are put on this water. Subsidized water goes to the farmers, but the farmers are not often allowed to resell them. So it gets locked into its current uses. It's not like they have an across-the-board ban on water transfers, but it's really difficult. So the water can't usually be resold, so it gets stuck in these lower-valued uses, and higher-valued uses go undersupplied. So it's not the quote shortages are largely caused by restrictions on the transfer of subsidized water, not from massive shortages in a particular region. And there's this is a sort of theory that's out there that says, well, everything that's really important needs to be run by the government. And water expert James Huffman says, no, because water is such a critical resource, it should be allocated under a regime that will assure its efficient use. And that regime is open markets based on private rights. When you get these kinds of subsidies, you get ridiculous overuse of water. People in San Diego County use about 150 gallons of water a day, perhaps recreating the bad movie Waterworld. I don't know. Sydney, Australia, about the same temperature, about the same standard of living. People use half that amount. And it's 5 times what waterlogged Amsterdammers use every day. Now, how much does it cost if you're in San Diego County to use your 150 gallons of water? About 78 cents. Less than half a penny per gallon of water. I wonder if that could account for overconsumption. So although agriculture accounts for 80% of water consumption in California, it's only 2% of the state's economic activity as a whole. And farmers use, a lot of farmers use flooding as their high-tech irrigation system, which is not that great. They flood the land to grow rice, alfalfa, and other very, very thirsty crops. And if the water were priced at market levels, this wouldn't be happening, not as much anyway. 43% of California farmland in 2010 used some form of gravity irrigation, which is pretty imprecise, use huge amounts of fresh water, and could be a lot better. So this is the result of massive amounts of government intervention. Look at Las Vegas and, of course, Amsterdam. So Las Vegas gets fresh water from a nearby reservoir, and Amsterdam has to take pretty contaminated or polluted water from the nearby canals. And it's very expensive to clean the water in Amsterdam, so it costs 5 times as much in Amsterdam as it does in Las Vegas, which is why, because it costs 1/5, people in Las Vegas, in a desert, use 5 times as much water as those in Amsterdam. And this price in Vegas is kept, again, artificially low, so you've got lawns and pools, and so it's terrible. So water managers in Las Vegas have actually decided to subsidize the cost of removing lawns, because in the western U.S., more than half of residential drinking water is actually sprayed outdoors or used outdoors. So water managers in Las Vegas sell water so cheaply that they're actually paying people not to use it. It was actually called cash for weed, because you were paid to take your lawn out until the DEA got upset with the name and decided to change it. So it's a very, very quick overview, but I really wanted everyone to understand that wherever you see these kind of shortages, wherever you see these kind of ridiculous misallocation of resources, look to the coercion of the state. Look for the wrong economic signals. Politically, it makes much more sense for politicians to keep prices low. And again, to defer maintenance is a big problem because it's all underground and out of sight, out of mind. There's huge amounts of underspending on infrastructure maintenance throughout America in general and the West, with the water systems in particular. But as a politician, it's a perfect deal to keep the price low. If you raise the prices, everybody starts screaming. And of course, the whole society has coalesced and made massive multi-billion-dollar investments based upon the existing allocation and price of water. If that changes, huge economic dislocations are going to occur. People are going to abandon family farms. The whole system of things is going to change. It's like up here in Canada, there are all of these should-be ghost towns, but are actually kind of zombie towns, which is where there was some economic activity like a mine. The mine ran out, but people still stay there because of welfare and this and that and the other. And so you get this rigidity and artificiality of regulation producing human settlements where they would normally have. I mean, if the government kept dumping gold, there'd still be a gold rush in California if they kept dumping gold into the streams. So we live in this kind of weird matrix where we are assigned in some ways to our lot in life by ridiculous and unsustainable government regulation.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. When we look at all of this, we do have a lot of water diverted to Las Vegas for this, Sin City out in the middle of the desert. And you will see lawns. and green lawns. So we have, a allocation of resources to the desert, and then we've seen in California where it seems like they are taking the desert back by artificially creating the scarcity in water by going, well, we got to protect this fish, and we have the environmentalists, which there's environmental implications from things we do, but not to the extent that these people take it at times. And I'm an outdoors person, so I love nature. I love that type of stuff. So I have an appreciation, but a lot of these people that that have always shied me away from the green movement are these people that really they know what they've read in a book, but they don't really interact in nature. They don't get gritty down to the bones with nature, and they seem like they're more of, I'm drawn to the excitement and the the drama of it, rather than really understanding every implication of what they cheer for. And a lot of times, those are the people you see being used as pawns. They'll tell the individual that has property how to manage their property, or, you can't build on this because this really should be a wetland area. At the same time, they've created situations that have flooded out areas and called them wetland areas. It's a really complex thing that they're doing, but in the overall scheme of it, it's a real simple thing, and you can relate this back to, Agenda 21. When America was trying to grow and have their populace prosper, and benefit off that prospering. Once it got to a certain point where now they're not just benefiting, they're causing harm to others. They're also taking back portions. So you see like the small family farms being attacked, but the big subsidized corporate ones that also contract with a big seed producer with GMOs, and you get all that combined. You don't see them affected as much. And they'll tell the individual, don't water your lawn, but those big subsidized farms that are mass producers, they're getting the allocations of water to produce that way, while the family farm, the small little tiny farm, they're also told that they should cut back. And I came across the article too out of Natural News, and this one's titled, Governor Brown Orders California Become a Water Police State as Region Begins Reverting to Uninhabitable Desert. For the first time in history, the California government has declared mandatory water restrictions designed to save the state from a water collapse, but it still won't work. See below. An order went out yesterday from Governor Brown's office requiring water agencies to implement new pricing models that discourage excessive water use, reports the LA Times. In other words, your water consumption costs are about to get even higher if you live in California. The directive aims to reduce water consumption by 25% across the state, an aggressive restriction that clearly qualifies as an emergency reduction goal. And I can almost guarantee you that the most burden of that water restriction, the 25%, will be put on individuals and not subsidized big corporate agricultural. They will get, an increase in price, but not as much as the individuals and the small family farms. And they're subsidized, so that helps pay for that. Says here, also included in the directive is a ban on non-drip irrigation systems for all new homes, a requirement for golf courses and cemeteries to reduce water consumption, and yet the very idea of green golf courses in the middle of California desert is insane to begin with. Force farmers to report more details on their water usage so that the state government can figure out where all the water is going and where to restrict it even further. Outlawing the watering of grass on public street medians. Discussions are also underway to throw water wasters in jail for up to 30 days, according to another LA Times article. The most likely source of intel for incarcerating water wasters will be the neighborhood snitches who monitor water usage of nearby homes and call the authorities if they see too much water being used. Will California soon fill its prisons with water criminals? If a cop drives by a yard where two people are standing around and one of them is smoking a joint while the other is watering his yard, guess which one will be arrested? Most Californians remain in a state of total disillusion and denial over the water collapse they are facing. Much of Southern California is a desert. It just doesn't have enough water to support the California lifestyle that has become far too familiar among those who live in the region. People who almost universally have no real clue how to survive or thrive in a desert, even though they quite literally live in one. So how do they survive? They live in artificial constructs called cities, which depend entirely on external inputs in the form of water, food, and electricity. Run out of any of those three, and cities like LA become nearly uninhabitable by all but the most hardened desert survivalists. But the reality that they live in an artificial construct which will inevitably revert to a desert has never really occurred to most Californians. That's why so many remain in a state of shock and denial over the water crisis they are now facing. The scientific data on rainfall and snowpack, however, tell a very different story. And this is one thing that I do see people looking at the water crisis and go, it's completely man-made. No, you're missing it. This type of drought happens in Southern California. This isn't the first time we've had a drought. But as the cities expand, these are artificial, and everybody wants their green lawn, and they keep extending farther and farther out into the desert. And you also have artificial agricultural things going on out in the desert, mean that eventually you can't supply using dams the amount of water needed to feed these deserts to have green lawns and all this artificial greenery that normally won't survive. And the problem is the cities do need to do something to fix this, but it needs to be on the people. What they will do with this type of stuff is not going to help the situation by putting people in jail. It's just another reason to harass people by government means, using force against others. Now, what people should do is learn how to make a landscape that can survive, plants that can survive with low water. Ways to, maybe bring in more rock for your landscaping. Have little pockets of your greenery that can survive in desert with the rocks around it all. Because you do have to think in reality. But what happens on the flip side is government gets involved. We already know about Agenda 21 and the pushes for a lot of this. What they will end up doing is basically running people out to the point where they can take back over sections of land. They don't want you to figure out how to live in the desert. They want you to get out of their desert. And if people don't recognize that, they really need to see a lot of what they'll do. That basically to have a house out there without it just being a mudslide area, you're going to, most people aren't going to go, let's, re-landscape with rock and this and that to, no, they're going to let their grass turn brown. And when they do get a rainfall, everything's just going to wash away. And we see this over and over. And they're going to run people out of there. They're going to make areas basically uninhabitable. By making them habitable and then taking away their resources during the drought, it's understandable you don't want your water supply to dry up. But again, who do you think will still get the water? Look at reality and how politics and all this works. Who's going to be affected by government control over this? And I think it's going to be the individuals. You're not going to see a big corporate company all of a sudden start getting people arrested for overwater consumption and being, letting hoses run or something. They'll get fined and continue to operate, making big money. But the individual trying to keep their lawn from becoming a mudslide will probably be put in jail and fined when they can't afford it. Okay, back to the article. It says here, quote, the water outlook in drought rack California just got a lot worse. Snowpack levels across the entire Sierra Nevada are now the lowest in record history, and recorded history. Just 6% of the long-term average, reports NPR. There will be virtually no runoff this spring or summer when the rain stops and temperatures rise, says California state officials via the LA Times Department of Water Resources spokesperson Doug Carlson characterized the situation as dismissal. That's why California is headed for outright water collapse via the LA Times. It does leave question about where the water will come from, Carlson said. Will there be enough of it? It will probably have to come from groundwater again, and that brings in a whole other set of problems and complications since the groundwater seems to be overtapped. Groundwater is not a plan, it's a delusion. Groundwater, this is California's solution. There is a 2-year wait for drilling a new well, and the cost is $500,000 reported NPR, which adds groundwater reserves are getting lower and lower as farmers and towns drill deeper and deeper, sucking out more water than there is coming in. It's gotten so bad in the Quinn Valley that ground is actually sinking. Last summer it sank half inch each month. Groundwater is, of course, fossil water that takes hundreds or thousands of years to be replenished. Using it up over the span of just a few decades leads to the certainty of a water collapse. Unfortunately, California's agricultural activities, which produce 1/3 of America's fresh produce, are now based predominantly on groundwater for irrigation. Scientists who raised the alarm are attacked by a delusional society living in a dreamy water fairy tale. A NASA scientist named J. Farmaglietti recently warned that California's water reservoirs have just 1 year remaining before a catastrophic collapse, in his own words, as published in the LA Times. The state has only about 1 year of water supply left in its reservoirs, and our strategic backup supply groundwater is rapidly disappearing. California has no contingency plan for a persistent drought. Groundwater pumping rates are excessive and unsustainable. Wells are running dry in some areas of the Central Valley. The land is sinking by 1 foot or more per year. Farmaglietti was, of course, heavily attacked for stating this because the one thing that most Californians absolutely don't want to hear about right now is the truth. And as we've all learned from watching the mainstream media's deceptions over the years, it's far easier for people to believe a lie than to believe the truth. California's water fairy tale has about the same factual reality as Disneyland's Small World ride. Sure, if you believe California's water will never run out, then you also believe those animatronic pirates are real people who just happen to love sitting around all day watching tourists float by on little boats. So the lie continues. California will be just fine. We're told water will be magically wrung from stones, or maybe somebody will invent cheap fusion energy devices that can turn seawater into fresh water for pennies on a gallon. Or heck, maybe Obama himself will simply issue an executive order demanding that rain fall from the sky according to the dictates of the commander-in-chief. Okay, I'm going to stop there. The article goes on for quite a while. When we look at this, we have to understand, a lot of this is an artificial construct put on by a push by the government for growth. Now, where have I seen something like this before? Oh, yeah, the whole Dust Bowl. And I'm not going to get into the details, just you yourself research the Dust Bowl and the government manipulation on what to produce, the wheat, and to overproduce, and to push more people out there to just produce this just breadbasket, not understanding the ramifications of that, where the soil was depleted of nutrients because they weren't rotating crops, they weren't using the best techniques because they were just being pushed and pushed to, you'll get all this money. We'll artificially raise the price. That way we'll get them out there so they can make money off of it, and we'll get them out there. And we had a Dust Bowl. Remember who suffered during the Dust Bowl? The individuals, the small people, not government, not the wealthy people. They were fine. This was something for the middle and poorer classes to have to deal with. This was a strain on, the populace, but not the elites. Okay, I think I'm going to move on. We kind of went into this for almost an hour here. 45 minutes. There was an interesting one I seen from We Are Change. Let me try to find it here. I have to actually go into their thing to find it because I already watched it. But this is Heart Science, How to Unlock the True Potential of the Heart. And I thought this was interesting. I want to get in this a little bit, and then I'm going to move on to some other recent news. So let me cue this up. Okay, I think it's going to work now.
This is Orgadowski of WeAreChange.org. I am here joined by Josh and Ron, and I've just been at their, I can't even describe what I've been through, but it's, I guess, a heart meditation / healing / understanding the power of love kind of workshop. We've been here for the last 4 days, and you guys went through, from Eastern religion and philosophy to Christianity to decalcifying your pineal glands to earthing to metaphysics, quantum physics, Tai Chi, meditation, electromagnetic fields, and sacred geometry, and all these different kind of ideologies, and all this information was thrown my way, and it was really fascinating. It was really amazing. That's the way I kind of describe it. How would you describe the work that you guys are doing? Ron?
Well, coming from a situation of life in which that we must all learn through our direct experiences, this is probably a soup of metaphysics. So our intention really is to provide people the understanding of what our modern science mixed in with ancient text, along with indigenous understandings, bring that all in together, and we're talking about something that a lot of people are not talking about. But our teacher, John Melchizedek from the School for Memory, we facilitate a class called Awakening the Illuminated Heart.
And Josh, do you have a different understanding of what you're trying to do here, or is it kind of the same kind of philosophy?
It's basically the same. I just see it as simple as getting out of your head and into your heart. And once you can get into your heart, the world will open up to you in a different way. Things become easy, they flow with grace. Yeah. So it's really that simple. Get out of your head, get into your heart. We're showing that there's an intelligence in the heart that is newly discovered. There's 40,000 cells in the heart that are brain cells. They're not heart cells. So there's literally a mini brain inside your heart. You can get in there and think with your heart.
Yeah. I kind of describe it as acting with kind of intuition, acting from kind of the inner voice and being your own person, and just going after true kind of happiness, true kind of freedom and liberation. Because a lot of times we see a lot of people out there who kind of idolize other people and put their kind of identity onto celebrities or musicians or sports stars, and they don't really become who they are because they can't really face what's inside. And sometimes, a lot of times, when you do look on that kind of inside, you kind of see things that you don't want to see, and kind of people ignore it a lot of the times. So that's kind of my understanding of what's happening and what you guys are kind of trying to teach there. But what kind of transition? Is that a fair explanation to what I just said? And do you guys envision that transition in a different way? Is it just becoming the ultimate truest version of yourself, or is it something else?
Well, you absolutely got to go within yourself. I mean, that's what it's all about. Jesus, Buddha, all the great teachers of the world talked about going within. So it's, our whole thing here is to lay on the table what we're learning about the energetics of the body. This is where our main focus is, on the energetics. We use the great artist, visionary artist, as Alex Gray's work all the time to give a visual of that. But it goes much deeper than that, of course. And like you mentioned, it's not easy to go within yourself and to look in the mirror sometimes, because, we're human. It's very convoluted here. It's a crazy reality. It's a reality of polarity. So the key is to, trust, to learn how to let go and go within and pull up some of those blockages that are taking place so that you can transcend them and evolve as an individual.
Josh, how do you see it?
Ron said it best, but just to reiterate a little bit, I believe that it's all about looking inside, because that's where the real answers come. You're not going to find anything out here. I mean, that's why it's called the universe, because you are the only thing that exists in the universe. So you have to go inside, and you're going to find those shadowy parts of yourself that may not be the best things to look at, but we find that if you're willing to, miracles will happen. And we see it all the time in these workshops. Like Ron said, you get on the table and you're willing to do the work. It's that simple.
Things just naturally kind of open up to you in this kind of world. Instead of just forcing things, they naturally just come to you without even kind of just trying to get it. It's accepting it and going with it. I remember part of my journey, I went through a lot of insecurity, a lot of ego, a lot of kind of low energy vibration kind of character traits that I saw within me, and kind of this path that I've been on that you guys have been able to kind of again refresh for me, made me see those different paths, and then try to fix that within myself so I could even try to be the best version of myself. But the ultimate kind of like rebranding kind of lesson is we're living in this computer program, and then we're really all just coders. We're the programmers. Our reality kind of envisions it. That's the way I see it. Do you guys agree with that analogy, with just life being a big computer program, a big computer, and us being programmers? And what kind of evidence do you have to support that?
I absolutely. I agree with that in many ways. Michael Talbot's book, The Holographic Universe, is a great example. Limit targets the field. I mean, we're living in an information age. Okay, so you got to use discernment from your heart. But the science is there, the text there, the research is there. We are kind of living in a holographic universe. But the key is, and what our emphasis is with the school, and what Drumvalo has brought out to everyone, is that there's two different ways of creating. You can use the mind to create, which creates a dualistic field of duality, because you have a left and right hemisphere of the brain. But there's also another way to create, which a lot of people don't recognize yet, and thank goodness for a department at Stanford University called Heart Math. We now know that we have these electromagnetic fields that are coming off of the heart. Okay, so in researching that on a deeper state, we know, as Josh had brought up, that the human heart has up to 40,000 brain cells in it. So the heart is conscious, and I know that might strike a lot of people the wrong way, but the heart was the first organ that's formed in the body, and then the tongue comes out of that, and then the rest of the body comes out of that. So the brain is not the focal point here. And once people begin to recognize that the heart is a unified field. It's unity, where the brain is separatism.
Well, I love the analogy of the computer program. I see our body as sort of like the hardware, and your spirit is like the software, and it comes into the body, and you use the body as an interface to upgrade the software, like Spirit 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, and right now we're at 3.0, third dimension, and we're going to 4.0, fourth dimension, and beyond. So it's really, I mean, like, you have this sphere around your body, and it's literally a projector screen, and your consciousness, the image, comes from the heart, moves up to the brain, and then out. And the pineal gland acts as a lens, a projector lens, to push those images out into the sphere. So the thoughts and the dreams that you have in your heart are like you programming what's going to be in your reality. So I really do feel what you're saying about the computer hardware, and I mean, it's reflected in all of our technology. So you can see that very clearly.
One of the things you guys brought up that kind of boggled my mind is the fact that after a lot of these people do this kind of meditation for world peace, you know, one day we do have that peace on the earth, but the second day there's more violence than there ever was before. When that first day was more peace than there ever was before because of that meditation, because it's coming from the kind of duality of the brain, because people who kind of think they're going to do something good actually end up impacting it in a kind of negative way. And I think that's a lot of fear of people with this kind of new information. They call it kind of new agey, they call it dark magic and all these other things. What kind of message do you have out there for, you know, the average kind of conspiracy theorist out there who just labels this kind of one bad thing? Like, what would you say to that person to make them understand kind of the deeper kind of truths of this?
Well, again, there's a lot of science here. This is definitely not new. This is ancient stuff. So that's why the school is called the School of Remembering. So there's not a word that we don't say to people that they don't already know. So as far as the people who want to call it all these labels, they just don't know any better, you know. So we could sit here and lay out all kinds of statistics and whatnot, but basically the truth is you got to go find out, you know. And we're coming from a heart-based situation, so our intention here is nothing of a negative vibratory state.
Like Ron said, there's a lot of science here. I mean, so for the skeptics, that's perfect. And it's not, again, it's not new. It's all ancient wisdom that we're revisiting and combining with modern technology and modern intelligence. Yeah. So really, I think it comes down to the fact that we've been lied to on a mass level, and you just need to turn off the TV and get out there and do your research. It's as simple as that. And then you'll see it's not even something that you need to convince somebody if they've done their homework.
And I would like to just add to that real quick. I mean, look at right now. If you go into the Thunderbolts Project with the Electric Universe Conference, here you have a symposium of 30 of your top physicists of the world coming together to pretty much tell us that everything we knew about the sun was wrong. So the surface of the sun is not a gas ball. It has a liquid surface to it. There's a current, not new, but there's electrical current that they can see. It's called the Birkeland currents. It's moving in zero time. That's crazy. I mean, it's hitting Pluto and it's hitting in the microcosmic levels instantaneous. So no longer are we going to sit here and talk about the speed of light. It's just an 8-track tape at this moment. Mm-hmm. So we have new sciences coming out that are shattering everything that's going on. It's awesome.
Yeah. I really personally enjoyed the scientific aspect, as well as going into all these kind of ancient beliefs and ancient religions, whether it's Christianity or another religion. And I like how you guys kind of handpicked, okay, this deals with the heart, now we're going to teach you about it. We're going to show you their kind of exercises that they did, their kind of rituals that they did. And it was interesting to kind of go through those rituals and kind of see the impact. But it doesn't, I mean, the way I saw it, it doesn't come from one particular belief, does it? Or no, it doesn't.
Global.
But one thing that I also noticed is a lot of people who were here were, of course, other people who were first kind of thrown into the kind of Illuminati, conspiracy, New World Order is going to get you, depopulation, and all this kind of fear aspect of it. The person I met kind of transitioned from being an angry, hateful, paranoid, just low energy person who was just preparing to fight, the kind of powers that be, the elite. And he transitioned from that kind of fear and paranoia into still being conscious, but acting in a totally different way, in a way of, okay, instead of just preparing for the worst, I'm going to create the best. And seeing that transition was really surprising, because I know a lot of people who are, deep down in that rabbit hole, who are just paranoid, who are afraid, and are inundated with kind of all this propaganda of the worst. But once we kind of start realizing we could actually create the best, that's when I think the real transition will happen. Can you talk about maybe your transition, or maybe if you don't want to share your transition, someone who you saw kind of change from that way, from kind of your teachings?
Do you got a month? Well, I've had some incredible transitions. I've been working in the healing arts world for 24 years, so I've been around energetic healing such as Reiki and Qigong and practice Feng Shui and just all the energetic stuff. I've seen countless, I mean, really honestly, countless numbers of stories of people before my eyes just in a Reiki session. You can see the demeanor of their body transition, their whole state of mind transitions. Really to keep this simple but make it clear for people is that when you begin to harness chi or prana, which is one of those sacred elements not talked about, but Plato talked about it. It was very sacred to his schools. But prana is huge. And when the population begins to understand truly the power of prana or chi or ether or tachyon or universal life force or great spirit, however you want to label it, ka, we will change drastically. So from that lower vibratory state of fear, false evidence appearing real, when you're in that low vibratory state, your perception of things are not pretty. Mm-hmm. So if you can just raise your frequencies and get up into an alpha state and a happy state, your perception's much different. It's just a quick example. I actually, when I was young, 10 or 12 years old, I had an uncle take me to the circus, Ringling, Bardos, and Bailey's. And we got in there, and he was sitting next to me, and before I knew it, he was having an anxiety attack. And I was having an amazing time. I saw everything going on at the circus. It was just awesome. There was so much going on. But he couldn't handle everything that was going on, and we ended up having to leave. So here's somebody who was sitting right next to me that was having a completely different experience than what I was having. And that always stuck with me, because perception is everything.
Mm-hmm. Your reaction is everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just a quick summary of my own personal story, because it was a lot like you were explaining this other gentleman. It really all started with all the conspiracy theory, all the fear, and just going real deep into the rabbit hole. Things get real dark real fast, and it gets scary, and you really just don't know what to do with that, to the point where, you start even contemplating suicide, and you just don't know what to do with yourself. And then once the journey can become inward, and you start to discover the love connection between all humans, all life, nature, the whole universe, it has a profound impact on your consciousness, and you can just react to things in a different way, in a loving way. So it's really that simple, in my opinion.
My life has definitely transitioned. I'm not concentrating on the worst. I'm concentrating on creating the best and building and educating and concentrating on the solutions rather than just the problems. And I think if we all start doing that, that's when the real change is going to happen. Any last closing comments, and where can people find out more about you?
Well, I started off with the Illuminati work too many years ago, and I thank people like yourself and the David Icke's and Alex Joneses and all the wonderful Jim Marses and all them who helped us figure out what in the heck is going on here. But at the end of the day, really, Jesus said to just be, and so. If you can learn how to change your vibration into a higher vibratory state, then you're going to affect everything around you, your pets, your plants, your family, friends, etc. And so we're just trying to get people to understand what's going on with the electrical aspect, what's going on with heart coherence. And so one by one, like popcorn, we can begin to, change this course we're on.
Mm-hmm.
And in closing, there's a saying that the longest journey in everyone's life is the journey from their head to their heart. So I would just like to thank you and everyone watching for having the courage to do their inner work and to be the change that they want to see in the world.
Okay, we are Change. We are Change.org. We are Change on YouTube. I wanted to play that because this is something we talk about a lot, is really looking deep in yourself to, change things about you in a way that you're never abandoning your deep beliefs, but what you're changing is your way you go about life, the way you interact with people, the way you are, with people and society, and it also creates a better personal life too, when you understand yourself and you're able to know exactly, this is my, my base beliefs, and having enough of an open mind to be able to look, at different aspects of your life and to always, you know, question, is my actions, you know, coherent to my beliefs? I don't believe in violence, but if I go around threatening people, well, then, you know, if I'm being violent, maybe I need to re-examine my beliefs. And I think for a lot of people, it really isn't too hard for them to find that. For others, it's real difficult. I think substances may play a part in a lot of that for people not to be able to really find their inner self. Um, that and power. They say, ultimate power corrupts, or absolute power corrupts absolutely. When people have a power, even if it's a construct, manipulation, to have power, it's something that corrupts not just politically or societally, but it corrupts that person. That person no longer looks at their base beliefs. They will talk about, their base beliefs, but they don't look at their base beliefs. They don't look at their inner self. That's how they're able to ignore the harm they cause. Because they're not willing to go, I've done this. Here's my base beliefs, base belief, on this. I say I'm nonviolent and don't want innocent people hurt, but I just dropped a whole bunch of drone, things on people over in the Middle East. If the president can't, look at this and see flaws in it, it's because, absolute power corrupts absolutely. When they become kings, they get that, ego. They're not going to look at what they're going to look at their mistakes as, those that was just unfortunate. Could have went better. Oh well. There might be others. We don't always see these people behind. We don't know if they went back in the back room and cried about something, but we do see what actions come after situations. And I think that's telling about a lot of the politicians. Okay. Now, trying to bring up this article here. Huh. we're going to get into some police state news here. In this one, I seen out a Free State Project, or not Free State, the freethoughtproject.com. State law that legalized self-defense against cops just got a man's conviction overturned. Indianapolis, Indiana, in a case of first impression, David Capello versus State of Indiana. Excuse me. The Indiana Court of Appeals reversed David Capello's conviction on charges of battery on a law enforcement officer. The court found that he exercised reasonable force under an amendment to Indiana law which legalized using force against public servants that unlawfully enter a person's property. The law states Section I, a person is justified in using reasonable force against a public servant if the person reasonably believes the force is necessary to 1. Protect the person or a third person from what the person reasonably believes to be the imminent use of unlawful force. 2. Prevent or terminate the public servant's unlawful entry of or attack on the person's dwelling, curtilage, or occupied motor vehicle. Or 3. Prevent or terminate the public servant's unlawful trespass on or criminal interference with property lawfully in the person's possession, lawfully in the possession of a member of the person's immediate family or belonging to a person's whose property the person is authority to protect. The special amendment came in response to an Indiana Supreme Court decision, Barnes versus State, which held the Castle Doctrine is not a defense to the crime of battery or other violent acts on a police officer. Indiana recognized the sacred nature of an individual's residence and took immediate action to recognize the unique character of a citizen's home and to ensure that a citizen feels secure in his or her own home against unlawful intrusion by another individual or public servant. Capello was originally convicted of battery on a law enforcement officer during a bench trial on May 12, 2014. The ruling was based upon his slamming of his door on the foot of Robert Webb, an off-duty constable employed as a part-time security for the apartment complex. Capello was sentenced to 365 days in jail, with 361 suspended for the battery conviction. Webb initially went to Capello's apartment to investigate reports of intimidation after staff complained of a verbal conflict. Upon Capello opening the door to his apartment, Webb stuck his foot in the apartment to prevent the door from being closed on him, according to court documents. Court records state that after becoming agitated, Capello attempted to close the door numerous times, hitting Webb's foot that had been placed inside the threshold of the door. Capello was able to close his door, but Webb claimed that the door had hit him in the foot, shoulder, and head, and told Capello he was under arrest for battery. After Capello refused to open the door for Webb, the officer called for backup and got a key from the apartment complex management office for Capello's apartment. The officer then entered his apartment without a warrant and arrested Capello solely for the crime of battery for hitting Webb with the door. Quote, but appeals court reasoned that Constable Webb had entered Capello's apartment without consent, probable cause, reasonable suspicion, or exigent circumstances because Constable Webb resisted Capello's subsequent attempts to close the door. Capello had a reasonable belief that force was necessary to terminate Constable Webb's unlawful entry into his apartment. Self-defense is a natural right. When laws are in place that protect this is part of the article, unquote, after his apartment. Self-defense is a natural right when laws are in place that protect incompetent police by removing the ability to protect oneself simply because the aggressor has a badge and a uniform. This is a human rights violation. Quote, the placement of Constable Webb's foot inside the threshold of the apartment door was an unlawful entry by a public servant into Capella's dwelling, and Capella exercised his statutory right under Indiana Code Section 35-41-3-2, Section I, Section 2, which reaffirmed that the Castle Doctrine is an affirmative defense to the crime of battery on law enforcement officer to use reasonable force both to terminate that entry and to prevent further access to his home. Capella used reasonable force by closing the door, thus a matter of law. The facts do not support a conviction for battery on a law enforcement officer. The court went on to state, we told that on the facts of the case, Capella exercised reasonable force under Indiana Code Section 35-41-3-2 I2. To prevent or terminate an unlawful entry by a public servant into his home. Thus, we reverse Capella's conviction, unquote. Castle Doctrine is part of American common law derived from English system. Under English law, a man's home was his castle. In present-day America, individuals are supposed to be inalienable. Will your home be your castle, or is it simply a place the government allows you to reside until it gets further notice? Indiana is leading the way by recognizing this right, creating legislation to protect it, and having a judiciary that interprets the law as it was written. And there's a map here that shows what states have some type of castle doctrine and which states don't, which there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 states that don't. Says, oh, that's the end of it. Okay. So, we see certain states stepping up. Now, we've had this issue here with the new law that has basically been fixed, you know, whatever you would call that. But with the whole freedom of religion for business type thing that got passed here in Indiana, I see the whole thing as a giant, you know, charade. And I found an article here from Washington Post that kind of relates to how it's more of a whole smoke and mirrors thing. And my first point that made me go, it's all BS. It's for a news cycle, for a news story, for a diversion. And my first thought is, hold on. Indiana is one of the states where you can deny service for any reason. And not in the way you would think, but it basically is one of the states that if you just refuse service and don't give a reason, you're protected. And that's at least how it's been operated here in Indiana. So passing a law like this was, one, a response in a way to you know, the whole baker had to, you know, being forced to vacate while we can get business. Yeah, that was part of it. But another part of it was, let's make a big news cycle out of this. And here out of the Washington Post, I find an article titled 19 States That Have Religious Freedom Laws, like Indiana's, that no one is boycotting. And, you know, it goes back to this was going to be used as a tool. They inherently were going to use this as a tool. And I don't like it for Indiana, being someone that lives in Indiana. You know, I don't want that, you know, bickering back and forth hate. But I also don't want the people, you know, I'm not a believer in don't let a private business choose who and who they don't provide for. Because, you know, then it can stretch into, well, you have to provide for the government. Government starts buying up all of your production, not allowing you to sell to the other person because, well, they always are there first with the money. They're on back order, you know. But another thing is, I don't support people like that. I don't support businesses like that. I support their right to be, you know, openly discriminatory, because then I can see who these people really are and not choose to do business there. And I'm going to have to find another one too, because something I think, who was it? I forget who posted it, but I'll find it here. But this one here, 19 states that have religious freedom laws like Indiana that no one is boycotting. Indiana has come under fire for a bill signed Thursday by Governor Mike Pence that would allow businesses to refuse service for religious reasons. The NCAA has voiced its concern ahead of a Final Four in Indianapolis next week. There are calls to boycott the state, and Miley Cyrus has even weighed in, calling Pence a name that we cannot reprint on this family website in an Instagram post. But Indiana is actually soon to be just one of 20 states with a version of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA. According to the National Conference of State Legislators, are those states in dark teal. And you can see a map here. And 40% of U.S. states have something similar to Indiana, as does the federal government. A federal FRRA or RFRA signed by President Clinton in 1993 shares language with the Indiana and other state bills prohibiting the government from substantially burdening individuals' exercise of religion unless it's for compelling government interest. So remember that. When they allow you to trample religious freedom, the only way they can do that under Clinton's 1993 RFRA is if it's for compelling government interest. Quote. So it says here, and is doing so in the least restrictive means. The fact that legislation like this is so widespread probably gave Pence some confidence in signing the bill, despite the controversy in Arizona last year over its bill that was ultimately scrapped. And in other states like Georgia, which are considering similar measures this year, the NCSL found 13 additional states are considering their own RFRA legislation. Pence has begun to feel the fallout from his decision, but while Indiana is being criticized, the NCAA didn't say it was concerned over how athletes and employees would be affected by Kentucky's RFRA when games were played there last week. There aren't any plans to boycott states like Illinois or Connecticut, and Miley Cyrus has yet to post a photo of President Clinton or any of the 19 other governors who have also signed RFRAs. Indiana might be treated as if it's only state with a bill like this, but it's not. Note, Arizona is included in the map of states with a Religious Freedom Restoration Act despite the veto of the controversial SB 1062 in 2014 because a RFRA bill was passed in 2012. So, it's something that I already knew it was a tool. Just for the simple fact that how it operated in Indiana, you could refuse service to anyone. That was something that was known. Now, where that kind of started changing a little bit is some of the bigger corporate stores kind of have maybe their own policies against doing that. But for the most part, someone was just acting like an idiot, you just tell them get out. Or you could just tell them get out. Why? Because I'm telling you to leave. Why? Because I'm telling you to leave. And that was it. So when you start passing laws like this, and you already see that the federal government has it, what it says to me, if there is any legit reason why they were trying to get this through, it's because the federal government, according to their own law, is disobeying their own RFRA signed by President Clinton, and in the own text says here, language in Indiana and other state bills shares language in Indiana and other state bills prohibiting the government from, quote, substantially burdening individuals, unquote, exercise a religion unless it is for a, quote, compelling government interest, unquote, and doing so in the least restrictive means. So when the federal government disobeys this, they're doing it for government interests. And if a state is trying to fight against the federal government from disobeying their own laws that they passed that are just like the Indiana one, shared language with the Indiana one, they're doing so for a agenda, basically. And states are trying to fight it by having their own state ones that still allow individuals. It's basically a nullification of that wording where states can go, no, because we do it. And this just creates another battle between state control and government control. That's why, control in the first place is just asinine. You are a individual that can think for themselves. One flawed human being isn't more worthy of ruling over a mass populace of flawed human beings. So it goes back to, just like with cops, badges and uniforms don't give you extra rights or powers. That's a illusion. An individual can stop a crazy person from hurting someone. It doesn't take a badge and a uniform to do that. So when they put a badge and uniform on and then they're not held accountable, that's an illusion made that the society that doesn't have these interactions ignore. So they can pick on groups of people. And if it ain't one group, it's another group. And then it just bounces around. And Well, you find out a lot of times it's not, about blacks or whites or Hispanics or Asians. They attack all the poverty groups. The people that they can keep in the system. And we can see these techniques used time and time again throughout history in some of the most hostile governments. When they get out of control, they keep growing out of control. And I just don't want us going down that path, but it seems that we're always bouncing back and forth between a little bit of freedom, then we're going to take a whole bunch away. A little bit of freedom given back, take a whole bunch away. I don't know where society's going. I can't tell the future. But, I really need to do a long episode on technology, the good things and the bad things, but I think I'm going to kind of get into some of that here. We got about half an hour. Okay. Bringing up a few articles and something else I want to look for. Can't find the audio clip I had. Oh, I'll just go on to the articles here. This one out of PopSci, PopularScience.com, PopSci.com. And this one's most of the web is invisible to Google. Here's what it contains: a roadmap of the internet's darkest alleys. The dark web revealed. You thought you knew the internet, but sites such as Facebook, Amazon, and Instagram are just the surface. There's a whole other world out there, and the deep web. It's a place where online information is password protected, trapped behind paywalls, or requires special software to access, and it's massive. By some estimates, it's 500 times larger than the surface web that most people search every day. Yet it's almost completely out of sight. According to a study published in Nature, Google indexes no more than 16% of the surface web and misses all of the deep web. Any given search turns up just 0.03% of the information that exists online, 1 in 3,000 pages. It's like fishing in the top 2 feet of the ocean. You miss virtual Marina Trench below. Or Mariana Trench below. Much of the deep web's unindexed material lies in a mundane databases such as LexisNexis or the rolls of the U.S. Patent Office, but like a Russian Matryoshka doll, the deep web contains a further hidden world, a smaller but significant community where malicious actors unite in common purpose for ill. And that's not true. But, not all these people are out here to do something bad. Welcome to the dark web, sometimes called the dark net, a vast digital underground where hackers, gangsters, terrorists, and pedophiles come to ply their trade. What follows is but a curious sampling of the goods and services available from within the darkest recesses of the internet. One thing is the dark web was created by government to be able to not be traceable for their own uses. Now they created something that others are able to use and they really can't do anything about it. It's a lot bigger than they are anymore. And the dark web contains basically ways of communication a lot of times for others without having everything database and collected. So there's things out there that there's dark web type emails that have been created. There's all kinds of different things going on in the dark web or dark net, and there's also a lot of legal things because you have that with the regular internet. It's not stopped just because it's on the surface, but of course it's going to go on in the dark net. Just, everything that's going to be stated is something you can do in society without the dark net. And it happens every day in society without the dark net. So it's just another tool. But here it says things you can buy, which we know a lot of this from Silk Road. But things you can buy: drugs, individual or dealer level quantities of illicit and prescription drugs of every type are available in the digital underground. The Silk Road, the now shuttered drug superstore, did $200 million in business in 28 months. Counterfeit currency. Fake money varies widely in quality and cost, but euros, pounds, and even yen are all available. $600 gets you $2,500. Counterfeit U.S. notes. Promise to pass the typical pen and ultraviolet light tests. Forged papers, passport, driver license, citizenship papers, fake ID, college diplomas, immigration documents, and even diplomatic ID cards are available on illicit marketplaces such as Onion Identity Services. A U.S. driver's license costs approximately $200, while passports from the U.S. or U.K. sell for a few $1,000. Firearms, ammunition, and explosive weapons such as handguns and C4 explosives are procurable on the dark web. Vendors ship their products in specially shielded packages to avoid X-rays or send weapons components hidden in toys, musical instruments, or electronics. Hitmen, service providers, including a firm name for the HP Lovercraft Monster, Cthulhu, advertise permanent solutions for common problems. For everything from private grudges to political assassinations, these hired guns accept Bitcoin as payment and provide photographic proof of the deed. Human organs in the darker corners of the dark web, a vibrant and gruesome black market for liver organs thrives. Kidneys may fetch, or live organs thrives. Kidneys fetch 200,000, hearts 120,000, livers 150,000. Pair of eyeballs, $1,500. Things that make internet crime work. Cryptocurrency. Now they're going to attack everything that allows information to be protected when government starts cracking down on the internet and censoring what can be put across the internet. Cryptocurrency, digital cash such as Bitcoin, Darkcoin, and payment systems. Liberty Reserve provide a convenient system for users to spend online while keeping their real-world identities hidden. Bulletproof web hosting services. Some web hosts in places such as Russia, Ukraine welcome all content make no attempts to lean their customers' true identities, accept anonymous payments in Bitcoin, and routinely ignore subpoena requests from law enforcement. Cloud computing. By hosting their criminal malware with reputable firms, hackers much less likely to see their traffic blocked by security systems. A recent study suggested that 16% of the world's malware and cyber attacks distribution channels originated in the Amazon cloud. Crimeware. Less skilled criminals can buy all the tools they need to identify system vulnerabilities, commit identity theft, compromise servers, and steal data. It was a hacker with just such a toolkit who invaded Target's point-of-sale system in 2013. Hackers for hire. Organized cybercrime syndicates outsource hackers for hire. China's hidden Linux group boasts up to 100 professional cyber thieves, some of whom are known to have penetrated systems such as Google, Adobe, and Lockheed Martin. Multilingual crime call centers. Employees will pay any dubious role you would like, such as providing job and educational references, initiating wire transfers, and unblocking hacked accounts. Calls cost around $10. How to access dark web's wares. Anonymizing browser. Tor, short of the Onion router, is one of the several software programs that provide gateway to the dark web. Tor reroutes signals across 6,000 servers to hide a page request origin, making clicks on illicit material nearly impossible for law enforcement to trace. Uses secret pages with .onion suffixes rather than .com, which are only accessible with a Tor browser. Secret search engines. In mid-2014, a hacker created Grams, the dark web's first distributed search engine. Grams allows would-be criminals to search for drugs, guns, and stolen bank account across multiple hidden sites. It even includes an I'm feeling lucky button and targeted ads where drug dealers compete for clicks. Criminal wikis. Carefully organized wikis list hidden sites by categories such as hacks, markets, viruses, and drug descriptions of each link help curious newcomers find their desired illicit items. Hidden chat rooms. Just as in the real world, online criminals looking to obtain the most felonious material must be vouched for before they can transact. A network of invitation-only chat rooms and forums hidden behind unlisted alphanumerical web addresses provide access to the most criminal of circles. So that from Popular Science. Now, they find webs like this on the surface all the time. They supposedly got the Silk Road found, one that was operating, or is supposed. Now, I see a time when they're going to attack this, and even though this shows some of the bad of the dark web, they absolutely do not touch anything on any of the good stuff about the dark web. It's been used by whistleblowers for some of the same stuff that they would be out there going, yay. Without the dark web, a lot of these people would have been probably grabbed before they could have blown the whistle. A lot of them, I believe, have been. Now, I kind of want to go into something that might touch on some of the good things with cryptocurrency. Let me see if I can find this again. Maybe not. Okay, I found it. And this is kind of into the title is Maintaining Our Online Liberties with Jeffrey Tucker, and this is from Press for Truth. But this goes into, why we need to be free on the internet, and why some central control over the internet in the name of preventing this stuff doesn't ever prevent it, but will censor. And most people's, ability or knowledge of the dark web is very little. And maybe that's why that article didn't really touch on any of the goods, because maybe they didn't explore it enough to find the goods. But let me play this clip here.
Hey there, guys. Dan Dix here from Press for Truth. We're here with the one and only Jeffrey Tucker of Liberty.me. Jeffrey, thanks so much for taking some time to speak with us today.
Well, it's good to be in Vancouver, and it's good to see you.
Well, you're here on our beautiful West Coast, and you're in town for a conference. Tell us, our audience at home, how the conference went yesterday.
Well, it's sponsored by the Institute for Liberal Studies, which is kind of what I think was the IHS of Canada, the Institute for Humane Studies of Canada. So it's a broadly liberal institute in the classical sense, but they invited me, and I thought the conference went very well. I was introduced as an anarchist, which I appreciated in a way, because otherwise, when we finally get to that moment in the talk, people are like overly shocked. So we got that over with to begin with. So that kind of allowed me to frame up my speech a little bit more.
Awesome. Now, something I was curious to get your thoughts on, because I have a feeling it's probably affecting you as something that right now is affecting me and my friends. It feels right now like we're almost under attack online. I know with me and some of my friends, our numbers on YouTube have changed. With my Facebook group, it's just recently gone from 390,000 likes to 375,000. I just lost 15,000 almost overnight. Have you experienced similar things online, and why do you think this might be happening?
Well, a lot of it is the online world is getting so big, and so these platforms are starting to filter their impressions, and this is true on Twitter too. People don't know this, but you're only going to get about 5 to 10% impressions from your total followers. Partly, it's driven by a money making issue. They're trying to monetize the platforms a little bit more. And that Facebook issue that you mentioned came about. I'm sure you know this, because they deleted all the accounts from everybody who left Facebook. So everybody lost a lot, in that sort of sweep.
So there was a purging of unused?
Yeah, there's a massive purging. Anybody who had left Facebook or had a false account or an inactive account was taken away from your likes. So that was the kind of demoralizing thing for people across the board. But, it comes after 12 months of Facebook tightening its algorithms very closely. So it's very difficult to get any impressions at all on Facebook, and they're trying to encourage you to boost, to have paid boosts for your posts. So it's all about monetization. I see it more as, it's a pain in the neck, and it's been a problem for many of us who are sort of legacy Facebook users who are used to using that as our main way of getting out there, suddenly discovering that it's not as useful as it used to be. So the world is really changing. I would say the digital world is diversifying ever more, and it gets to be a problem. It used to be rather centralized with Facebook, 2 or 3 years ago. And now things are just changing just really dramatically. The whole social world, I think there's something like 500 or 600 different platforms out there. And so it's hard to stay ahead. It can be very frustrating. I don't see it as conspiracy, really. I see it as just a kind of a growth and maturation of the social realm.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. It seems a lot of it has to do with monetization, where they'll allow certain pages to get so big and then get so many views, and then kind of clamp in and tighten up on that and say, if you want to get those kind of views that you used to get, you got to pay for it now.
Right, and it's devalued a lot of property too, right? I mean, people with 200,000-300,000 likes in the past had a pretty valuable piece of property, and now that it's just not as valuable as it used to be. Right. So it's changed a lot of things. It's a hard thing for sort of independent news people to keep up with. It's been very frustrating. And some of the new platforms that are out there are just not useful for institutions and purposes like what we want to use them for. I mean, things like Yik Yak, which is the most popular app among under 25-year-olds, are entirely anonymous and completely useless for institutions. Right. So I don't know. It's a problem, and it's difficult. Just requires a lot of creativity.
Well, people in the activist community often feel that they're directly under attack because this is coinciding in the same time with all these bills like Bill C-51 here in Canada, just clamping down on people's internet freedoms. Are you seeing those similar kind of pieces of legislation where you're from?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, just a couple of days ago, antiwar.com got its Google Ads deleted. They've been disabled from using Google Ads because Google objected to some of the content on antiwar.com, like they had pictures of Abu Ghraib prisoners and things like that, and some attacks on U.S. foreign policy that are pretty edgy. And Google AdWords specifically flagged those articles, those URLs, and said, you have to take these down for us to re-enable AdWords. So it's very interesting to see how a kind of revolutionary company like Google, 10 years ago was epic, just changing the world, has now been sort of slowly brought into the ruling class, threatened with destruction. Here's what happens is the central state goes after these institutions, these upstarts and these disruptive institutions like Microsoft or Google or Facebook or Twitter, and they threaten them with things like antitrust actions or various regulatory things, and basically what it's a blackmail, and the message from the state to these institutions is you better become part. You're going to destroy you, or your option is to become part of the ruling class and start to behave and be a compliant player in our game. And then you'll be allowed to survive. Right. So this is what's happening. This is the process of civilizing Google and Microsoft and Twitter and Facebook. And look, this is an old story, right? It goes back 6,000 years, where the ruling class that runs the state has to gradually roll in upstarts into the position of the incumbent power holders and comply with the rules and the regulations so it doesn't disrupt the existing status, wealth, and privileges of the ruling class. So that's what's going on right now. I mean, what's the answer? The answer is we have to innovate faster and use every tool we have.
Well, you mentioned various platforms, and that's something that people are going to have to start looking into, especially if they're going to clamp down on us like this. What other kind of platforms out there do you know of? Do you think maybe people ought to be checking out?
Well, I mean, I have to say something good about Liberty.me. We're completely independent, and for $5 a month, you get a platform to broadcast all of your views. Views has been very helpful for many institutions. AndyWar.com, Jeff Berwick has been using it. Many institutions are now using us, and that's one of the reasons I established the platform as a free space. I mean, basically, there is no way in hell we're ever going to become part of the ruling class apparatus. I mean, it ain't going to happen. Our servers are outside the U.S. We can't be pressured.
And is social network similar in the style that you connect with friends?
Yeah, it's got all the Facebook functionality, but But what we're doing is crowdsourcing our SEO on the publishing platform too. So if you're a member, you get a place to publish, and we have a create space for artists and designers and musicians and that sort of thing, and it allows them to get eyeballs on what they do. So you're not sort of isolated and alone out there floating around on Blogger or some random YouTube account. You're actually in a space where people know to go for liberty-minded material. So that was the original vision, and I'm so pleased to see it.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, that is the answer. I think that's a similar thing that we did with the media. It's like, don't hate the media. If you have a problem with it, just become the media, and that's what we decided to try to do. So, yeah, if you have a problem with this institution, don't hate it. Maybe just try to do it better.
Yeah, there's a word that people have been throwing around about the peer-to-peer age, which is, I love the term, it's called equipotency. What it means is equal power. So the capital is being distributed sort of democratically. So anybody can make a movie, watch a movie, provide a service, get a service, rent a room out to somebody else, or rent somebody else's room. I mean, these peer-to-peer technologies that are coming along allowing direct exchange between people, mostly as a result of the app economy, as the ultimate disruption. See, the thing is, I don't really believe that the ruling class can control the world forever under these conditions.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're starting to see truly free markets emerge. So as long as the internet stays truly free and open, perhaps we can continue to share our information.
Yeah, and there's fits and starts, right? I mean, I have friends of mine who have innovated great platforms, like Ross Ulbricht built the Silk Road. Mm-hmm. When I was in jail and being threatened with like life in prison, and meanwhile there's another dozen online sort of free markets that allow for exchange of drugs and narcotics and that sort of thing. So it hasn't set us back, but it's been very costly in human terms.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember the actual saying, but the trees of liberty have to be rooted with the blood of patriots.
Well, I think it's good for us too, to all of us who love liberty, to remember that there are people suffering right now on our behalf. My friend Charlie Shrim, who's a great innovator in the Bitcoin space, is on his way to reporting in the next 2 weeks to federal prison, where he'll be there for like as long as 2 years, and he didn't do anything wrong. And in fact, he paved the way for others. So there's a lot of victims along the way. It's good to keep them in mind. One of the things that Lovers of Liberty can do, actually, is look up these people, find out their addresses, send them magazines and books and notes of support. That's just something good that you and I can do for the cause of liberty.
For sure. And we all have to get involved at this point in time. It's crucial, as we can see by what's happening online. Where can people go if they want to get involved, if they want to join the website and be on this platform that you're building?
Well, Liberty.me is a great place. You should go and join. It's a 30-day free trial. We don't accept any advertising. And one of the reasons is we don't want to be blackmailed by advertisers, so we want to maintain our independence. I've also accepted a position at a very old and venerable institution called the Foundation for Economic Education, where they've sort of tapped me to build up their digital empire. It's not brilliant right now, but we have a long legacy and a real dedication to human liberty. So that's something I'm going to be doing over the next few years, is building up the fee.org.
Awesome. Very exciting. Liberty.me, guys. Check it out. Jeffrey, thank you once again for talking to us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it very much.
Okay. When we look at a lot of the websites that have tried to start up on the surface, create a anonymous way of protecting your identity, a way that help prevent you from being spied on. Now, I'm not going to play the clip because, well, there's not enough time. But there's a clip from We Are Change. And it's about the founder. It's an interview with the founder of LavaBit and how he ended up basically just shutting it down and erasing everything rather than have a business that the government would have access to. And court ordered gag orders put on him didn't allow him to go into a lot of detail, but basically he was one person that stood up against them, and they're retaliating against him. That I think that's why the dark web is definitely crucial. It is a way to get information and give out information. Definitely, people in China. If a lot of these alternative media sites, other type sites started transferring it where it was easier to go to and check out without ever even being tracked. I think we would see a surge in things. But what that's also going to do is probably also hurt if the only access you get is through something like maybe a Tor. Because then when you do get people you partner with or affiliates that you're trying to cover operating costs, and that's kind of hard to do. And why I like affiliates rather than advertisers, which I no longer have Google Ads. I like affiliates because you get to choose, and they don't try to manipulate you. They don't try to, where we're offering a product. If you want to, help advertise the product, which I only do ones I use, like, non-GMO seeds and things like that, prepping gear, it's a way for you to basically be able to get a little kickback from stuff like that. And it's always small amounts. But if you look at anything that comes in large amounts, it's coming with strings. And I definitely think that those type of advertising, I think, can sometimes corrupt. Not all the time. There's people that have gotten disputes with their advertisers because they were not willing to change their content. Kind of like what anti-war and Google Ads is going at each other about. But Google Ads is kind of it's become a thing that, because it's similar to the affiliate, except it's another middleman in between you and the company, instead of just being, through a company's affiliate link or whatever. It becomes like this third party in between you guys, more like a fourth party, because you're kind of the third party in between the customer and the company. So, Google decides to pop their head in there and be where advertisers and stuff will be on it and targeted and track you with cookies. And they kind of create an empire with that. And now, they're pulling their ads off of all kinds of people. Definitely alternative media. They've been pulling Google ads off of a lot of those type people. And a lot of times it's when they're speaking about U.S. aggression or corruption. Well, that shouldn't be a surprise when you understand that, in a way, Google's tied to the government with government contracts. They do it through their subsidiary type companies, like when they bought Boston Dynamics. Well, that they create stuff for DARPA. You understand why maybe they don't want to help support the people that are going against the military-industrial complex. And when you look at what's going on with the internet and how more controlling it's getting through all these companies, either voluntarily or being manipulated or threatened to basically be censoring tools. And we've seen this with Facebook. They censored Ron Paul people all through 08 and 012. Thank you all for tuning in, and stay tuned here on UCY.tv.
The Anti-Media Radio, your host Nick Burnaby here on UCY.tv.